Who Dat Nation, welcome in. Excuse the voice, she got back from the doctor. Welcome, Who Dat Nation. This is going to be a quick hitter episode for the day, but we got some good information to hit you with, including biggest maybe of all. I didn't put it in the title, but that's okay. Doesn't mean it's not important, just means I didn't put it in the title. Looks like the Saints aren't going to be on Hard Knocks, ladies and gentlemen. So a huge congratulations to non-New Orleans Saints. I'm very excited that somebody else is going to pull this off. It seems, and it's not official, but it looks like things are leaning in the New York Jets way, if we are to believe reports that have come out today, which is, just grain of salt. Mike Florio. I know some Saints fans have got opinions on Florio and stuff, but that's the report that the New York Jets will be getting, again, Hard Knocks, and New Orleans will be avoiding it. And you know what? We talked about this on the show a few weeks ago. This makes sense, right? Getting the Aaron Rodgers storyline out there, big market, go for it, enjoy it, New York. Personally, I'm happy about that. I realize that not everybody will be. There are definitely some fans who wanted to see the New Orleans Saints on Hard Knocks. I was pretty strongly against it, but seems to, if this report pans out, the Saints have dodged a bullet. We'll see if it actually ends up being the way. Shout out to TJ, Bim, AJ, Matthew, Night Lord, Mr. Jerry, James Griffone, everybody else coming into the show here tonight. I started a little bit late, like I said, was at the doctor's and getting all those fun tests and everything. And you know what, Mr. Jerry, in our live chat, you are absolutely correct. Congratulations to the LSU baseball team joining the LSU women's basketball team as national champions, which is pretty daggum cool. And you think about what it's been like to be a LSU sports fan for the past 20, 25 years. There's been a lot of success across a pretty impressive, in my opinion, set of sports. I mean, we're not just talking about, hey, the football team's been good. We're talking about college basketball being good, about baseball being good. I mean, just LSU as a whole representing the boot pretty well, I'd say. So shout out to them. So we've got New Orleans is apparently missing Hard Knocks. We've got Derek Carr kind of opening up a little bit, talking about, being let go from the Raiders in the entire process. And, here's a direct quote from him. It says, I was, for a lack of a better term, I was very upset. I was mad. You spend 9 years somewhere. You have all the records and you can play at a high level, and for something to get in the way, whether it was, whatever reason, money related or whatever, injuries, I have said I don't even want the money, just to play 2 more times in front of our fans. I didn't get that opportunity, so it definitely lit a fire inside me to keep going. Now, if y'all remember, this is, of course, Derek Carr referring to the end of the season where the benching, alluding to, was it money related? Was it injury related? Jeremy Fowler for ESPN put out a report saying that the team opted to reserve his health in case they could have gotten a trade. Now, that ended up happening, but it also would have resulted, if Carr had played, potentially him getting hurt. And that would have put them on the books for, $40 million in guaranteed money. If he had gotten injured, thus couldn't pass the physical, they would have been liable to carry him. So it seems to be, just going on that report that came out weeks ago, that the Las Vegas Raiders made a business decision with Derek Carr and benched him. Whether he was the best way to win or not didn't really matter. At that point, they were looking at the good old greenbacks, and Carr said, look, it affected him. And honestly, it should. At the end of the day, this is a business, but that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to take things personal. I think that's completely okay. And, to have a team just straight up disrespect you like this, and that's what it is. And I'm not saying that the team doesn't have the right to make these type of decisions. You, of course, do. If you want to throw out your final 2 games of the year and not really necessarily care, you've already lost everything. It's not like the Raiders were going to go to the playoffs if they won their final 2 games last year. I mean, it was pretty set in stone that their division wasn't going to go their way, and they weren't going to make the playoffs. And they had the loss against Pittsburgh, which dropped them to 9 losses. And at that point, they just kind of said, screw it. Let's just move on. Let's not worry about it. And they ended up finishing 6-11 because they had to play San Francisco the next week and then Kansas City in the last. So I think that's a really, again, when we get into what's right and wrong from a business standpoint, maybe there is no right and wrong here. I can definitely understand why this would affect Derek Carr. And keep in mind, this is just him getting asked questions. It's not like he's setting up interviews to trash the Raiders. This is happening as we're going through, the mini camps and training camps, people asking questions. And I think that's okay. I don't think that he's, any type of drama here. I think that it's just him sharing, which I think is fine. I think he's had a really good impression left in camp. I mean, from who I've talked to and from even reports that all of y'all have seen, we've seen Derek Carr is really acclimated well to the locker room. He's acclimated well to the coaching staff. And it seems to be that the Saints are trying to put everything they can in the path for Carr to have success. And even the players themselves are obviously doing a lot to personally grow. I mean, we talked about how valuable I felt the tight end room was, and I feel like that it really is undersold in the NFL. And here we learned this earlier this week, or in the last week, that Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau attending the tight end university. Now, for those that don't know what the heck that is, several years ago, Von Miller kind of started this off-season workout program for pass rushers. And when he started his little clinic, it grew, became more popular, and now other positional groups have picked it up, where you've got the offensive line doing stuff with the masterminds, with Duke Manyweather in Texas, and you've got Pro Bowlers, All Pros, Super Bowl champions there. I mean, we've got, let's see, the New Orleans Saints, let's see who's worked out with Duke in the past few years. Ramczyk, Andres P., Cesar Ruiz, let's see, Trevor Penning. I don't know if Trevor Penning has this year, but he did last year. There's a lot of familiarity there, and that's really grown, and now you got the tight end university. So it's really cool to see that type of growth. We'll see if it translates at all to the field. Obviously, we are in the middle of June, heading into July. You can't really know anything about any team at this point. It's why we don't pay a lot of attention to the preseason rankings or the strength of schedule, because you just don't know how teams are going to move out, right? You have no idea how you're going to grow or regress, no matter what player it is. So as far as Carr is concerned here, I think the way he got done sucks. Anytime that you can get some good bulletin board material, you hope that it pushes your guys to be better. But we'll wait and see. It's going to take time. Sadly, we have to wait. And I know everybody's ready for the season to start now. We're in that wonderful period where we are just waiting for football, because now we've got some downtime. We're going to have a few weeks here where the only news really coming out is stuff like Michael Thomas right now posting his workout videos, and he's probably going to get, a random drug test here very soon. That's ridiculous. But that's also where we're at this point in the season. That doesn't mean we can't have fun. There's also some great stuff to talk about. I'm definitely here for it. And even some good things happening where with the Superdome, for a lot of y'all who listen to the show, I know we have a couple season ticket holders here and everything, but they have been working a 5-year plan to renovate the Dome. Every offseason, they're adding something into it. One of the things being added right now, if you are in the 500 section, which I'll be honest, I actually usually sit, like one of my favorite spots to sit is in the 500 section at the lower balcony level. To me, it's a great height to actually see the entire field, but you're not all the way up in like the super nosebleeds of the top of the 600s or anything. But you have a new signature bar being opened at Gate C. That's on the east sideline over in the Dome. And this is part of that whole revamp they're doing, where they're adding, new club areas. They're adding in better amenities for the fans. And this is going to be one of those amenities set for the fans being on the 500 level, which I'm pretty excited about it, just to be honest with you. I think that I would have loved to have had a new stadium. I really would have. And that's not to disrespect the Dome, but I would have rather a complete rebuild. But if we didn't get a rebuild, you definitely need the Dome to have a lot of money invested into it to kind of bring it up to snuff, to use just a cliche term. So with that in mind, all the cool things you see them investing in right now, if I had to pick the best stadium in the league right now, Minnesota might have the best one. Like, I don't want to say that like Minnesota's got the best team or anything, but man, that stadium is absolutely gorgeous. We'll be honest, Atlanta's pretty freaking dope as well. Gotten to go to Dallas's. Now, Dallas has actually had their Jerry World for a while now, but New Orleans definitely needed to up their game when it came to the stadium. You've got the atmosphere, you've got the culture of the city and the state. You definitely have an area that people want to come to, which is why New Orleans gets so many Super Bowls. But in terms of just like being at a sports facility, going to a game, amenities wise, you definitely had to get a lot more added to keep the Superdome kind of updated and away from just tearing it down and starting over. I think they're doing a good job. But anyway, that's, I think, a pretty neat thing getting at it. So, dope stuff. Jerry says, this is what happens when bad news travels fast. Ask a Falcons fans, the Panthers, or Sucks fan. Jerry, you are a very passionate man. You know that? You are a very passionate man, Jerry. How are you doing, boss? Good to see y'all coming in. Good to see Casimir as well. King Arthur, good to see y'all coming through. He says, new renovations need to be discounted on ticket prices. Things have been jumping up the last 4 years. And I think that's actually just normal how things are. That's just the economy, good or bad. He says, we can't leave the Dome. I'll be honest, AJ, the Dome don't mean anything to me. The Dome is just a building. The electric atmosphere that New Orleans has and all that has nothing to do with the Superdome. And I realize that it's iconic, especially, you know, if you're from the Katrina era, as in you were pre-Katrina and either moved back to the city or just that's just a staple of, your core memories and everything. But hell, even that was 20 years ago. And I'm not discounting how horrific that was. Now, obviously, the Katrina stuff has been discussed ad nauseum between fans and then Falcons fans thinking they're cute with their Katrina jokes and all that type of stupidity. But truly, I do think that the Dome would have been much better to being just completely replaced. But that's me. And I would say that if you love the Dome, that's great. But if you do get the opportunity, visit a lot of these new domes coming out. And there are just some amazing buildings being put together. Now, I've not gotten to go to the one in LA. There are definitely some new ones that I've not attended. But in terms of just like enjoyment factor, what they can do, man, I would have loved a new stadium. But at the same time, you know who would have had to pay for it? Us, which is exactly why that didn't end up happening. Because if y'all have looked, teams don't pay for their stadiums. They get the state to pay for the stadiums. But we'll be at it no matter what, and doesn't end up mattering in the long run. King says, is there any chance we get an all-black Color Rush alternate that we can wear with our black helmets? So you can only get one Color Rush a season. So they would have to get rid of their all-white Color Rushes. Now, they already have, and this is a weird thing. I call it kind of weird. You have two white uniforms. For those that don't remember, you have two all-white uniforms right now for the Saints. You've got your Color Rush. You've got technically three. You've got a full away white, which is a white top, white pants, but it's not the same as the Color Rush. And then you've also got the throwback, which is the Color Rush, but also you can, they've changed the pant on it before. I am not a huge fan of a lot of the different ones that they have rolled out. The Color Rush one I love, but you can only have one Color Rush. So I doubt that you would see them switch it to black. But I do like the all black uniforms they have. And you also have the stupid limitations when it comes to the black helmet. Last year you had the white on white with the black helmet. Very curious to see if they move those rules any to allow you to try some new things or wear something different. Very curious to see. The black helmet was kind of mixed results for me last year. We'll wait and see. How about an all black uniform and the black helmet with a home game? Personally not big on it, but that's just my personal opinion. Color Rush with the gold helmet. Love it. I think the Color Rush with the gold looks great. I do. Dupree's good to see. The black helmets are ugly according to TJ. I'm hit or miss on them. I personally don't like the black helmets with the fleur-de-lis middle, like mohawk thing going on. I would have preferred them if they were just straight, pure black with the fleur-de-lis on the side, not with the fleur-de-lis little minis in terms of like a mohawk in the middle. I wasn't a big fan of that, but I didn't really have an issue with the black helmet itself. But I didn't really like the mohawk. Bring back the Louisiana shoulder patches. Hey, I've said for a long time that if I could pick a New Orleans uniform, I love the throwback from the 80s. The lines, the big Louisiana patches, which you actually have found at various points throughout New Orleans. I like the old school retro looks, and I think that's just me getting old because the retro Saints uniform is the one I prefer the most. It's actually one of the reasons I love the Color Rush so much is you're getting vibes of that uniform. I am not a huge fan of, one, a black top with white pants. Not a fan. I'm not a fan of the white top with black pants. And I love the classic throwback with the classic gold pant. All black uniforms, also crispy and clean. But that's where I'm at. Am I wrong for having a wait and see approach to the new season optimism? The constant injuries have derailed our talent so consistently. I don't think you're wrong in that at all, King Arthur. Truly, you're not. When it comes to the Saints and any team, they're going to be best when they're healthy because as much as we talk depth, as much as we preach it, the truth is almost no team in the NFL can lose even a handful of starters and still have consistent success. And that's just the truth. Just fact. And it doesn't matter if you're the best team in the league or the worst. If you lose a lot of your starters to injury, you're going to struggle to continue winning football games. The New Orleans Saints are not special in that. So there you have it. Simple as that. If you want to hold your optimism back, it makes complete sense. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. I would say, though, that there are reasons to look forward to what the Saints have this season. I think that the division is up for grabs in that no matter what fan base you're a part of right now in the NFC South, you believe your team has a legitimate shot to win the division. And honestly, they're right. I don't care if it's a Bucs fan that comes through, a Panthers fan. Truth is, the NFC South is wide open. And just to add a little dose of pragmatism to what King Arthur's saying here, it's easy to get excited about your team. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't get excited about our team. We absolutely should. Get excited about your team. Believe that they're going to win. But also, try to have a little bit of a realistic approach when you do that. You've got a brand new quarterback. You've got an offensive coordinator that everybody's been calling for his head for a while now. You've got new offensive line pieces. You've got, new wide receivers. You've got one wide receiver that you hope comes back, but honestly, has played 10 games in the past 3 years. And your best players are aging. And while that doesn't mean they're guaranteed to go downhill now, like this upcoming year, they will at some point. Like they're closer to that than they're not. Demario Davis is closer to that than he's not. Cameron Jordan is closer to that than he's not, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after, right? There's literally valid reasons to sit at this team and go, I just don't know if they've got it. At the same time, I do think that there is a lot of talent on this roster. Take away the age factor. Just look at them for who they are. I think there's a lot of talent here. I think that there's enough talent to cover up some of the issues from the offensive play calling side. I think that you were really limited in what you could call last year with an injured Jameis and obviously with Andy Dalton, who at this point in his career is a very good backup, but not someone that you want as a full-time starter. There are reasons to look at this team and say they definitely got better. And I said this on the show, a few weeks ago, right after the draft. This team did everything they needed to do to get better at every hole they had. Now, did they get the best possible option in those positions? I mean, no. I mean, Derek Carr is not historically or even now better than Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers can completely just do dog crap in New York, right? That's possible. But you still got an improvement at quarterback. No matter what, I think you improved at quarterback. You picked up Derek Carr, and then you drafted a future model. So you did a lot to go after the most important position, but you didn't stop there. Like you shored up the interior of the defensive line, which has been a problem. You drafted a new 3-tech. You went and got in my opinion, a very good 1-tech, and then you also brought in depth. You went and drafted, after just drafting, another defensive end. You got another one. So you're trying to address your biggest issues. You look at every part of this roster. New Orleans tried to address it, and there aren't that many holes. Yes, you have question marks, but you don't really have holes. Now, the question marks can turn into holes. Good example of that is Adam Trautman. Adam Trautman never worked out, but that's you addressing a problem, right? It just never worked out. But if you look at the starting roster right now, let's discuss it. Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas are your expected starting 3 wide receivers of right now. And right now, they're all healthy and could go right now if they needed to. Trevor Penning, Andres Pete, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, and Ryan Ramczyk are your expected starting offensive linemen. Question marks there. Trevor Penning is a question mark. How many games will Andres Pete play? That's a question mark, a legitimate question mark. Cesar Ruiz, can he continue to have a great year after a fantastic third year? Will he repeat or will he return to what we saw before? Ryan Ramczyk, will he ever get 100% healthy again to return to being an all-pro level player? There's question marks there. Tight end, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau. I really love this duo, but there are also question marks. How will Foster look in New Orleans with new coordinator working with Johnson? And then also, will he keep that rapport he had with Derek Carr? And can he get better? Derek Carr is obviously your new quarterback, but that's a big question mark, right? Alvin Kamara is a staple, but you got Jamal Williams and Kendra Miller who will combine for more touches than Alvin Kamara. That's what I believe will happen this year. They'll combine for more. Those are brand new pieces. So those are question marks. They addressed everything. Now you got to see if it actually pans out, if you move forward. Because he says, will AK be suspended? We still don't know. A lot of people expect New Orleans to have a 6-game loss of Alvin Kamara. But until it actually rolls in, you don't know for sure. And we'll see how it goes. King says that year wasn't fantastic by Ruiz. It was average, giving too much credit. No, it wasn't, King. And people who cover offensive line specifically have said that Ruiz had a top year last year. So let's not discount Ruiz. Nobody's overhyping him. The best minds in and around the league said that Ruiz went to that level last year. You just got to hope that he stays there. You guys hope that he stays there. And again, legitimate question, because consistency is key. And we talk about Andres Pete, how much he improved, but Andres Pete's also not playing 16, 17-game seasons either. His big issue is, sure, he got better, but now he's missing games. He's missing games. King says, what are the top 3 things that are paramount for us to be successful? You cover offensive line? No, you don't, King. And even if you did cover offensive line, you're not better than the people saying Ruiz had a great year. So, and yeah, I'm not trying to be a jerk. You're just not. Because if you were, your name wouldn't be King Troll on YouTube, right? It would be something. You would be a well-known offensive line aficionado, but you're King Troll on YouTube. And that's cool. But hell, offensive line's also my thing. That's what I was best at when I was doing scouting. And I'll tell you that Ruiz looked freaking fantastic last year. Was he the best guard in the league? No, he wasn't Martin. He wasn't Nelson, none of that. But to say that he was average at best is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But in terms of King Arthur question, one of the top 3 things that are paramount to be successful, number 1 is Derek Carr. And to get specific about what Derek Carr needs to do, and Lester, we don't believe New Orleans is doing Hard Knocks correct. It has not been officially announced, but reports have come out saying the Jets are going to get it. Number 1 is Derek Carr, but to be specific about Derek Carr has got to show that, 1, he can handle the play calling, as in, instead of it being Pete Carmichael calling one play, going back to how the New Orleans offense used to run, which was whoever was the quarterback, Drew Brees being the predominant one, but even when you had other guys in, giving a set of plays, 2 or 3 plays, and having that decided at the line of scrimmage pre-snap. If Derek Carr can get to that level, that automatically elevates this offense past where it was last year. That doesn't guarantee this offense is a top 5 unit, but it does already elevate them better than what they were last year. And that's a big deal. That's just a singular example of what Derek Carr needs to do. Number 2, defensive line. Big issue is consistent pass rush. And this is probably the biggest question mark left on this team. How are they going to address the pass rush situation, and how are they going to find consistency and success along the defensive line with what's expected to be 2 rookie starters and 3 brand new people regardless who are starting? 2 of them potentially rookies. I guess it is possible that you could have Carl Granderson, Tano Passanio, or even Peyton Turner starting opposite Cameron Jordan, but I really think it's completely open. Like you can't say for a fact that it's not going to be the rookie. However you get multiple bodies in there, try it out. Try it out. So King Troll says, just because Deuce say look good doesn't mean look good. King Troll, first off, your name says enough. But also, I'm not even saying I'm saying that. I'm saying the top minds who cover the offensive line in the NFL, like literal teams, come to them. Super Bowl winning players come to them. All pros are trained by them. They're the ones saying it. So King Troll, literally nothing you can say can counter that. When the best in the business say something, it's not about just a guy with a podcast or who went to a scouting academy. We're talking about the best evaluators in the business are saying that Ruiz went to that level. And you can't argue that. You can't argue that. So it's not about like Deuce says he looks good. No, it's about the best people who cover offensive line said he looks good. And that matters. I was just about to say that I'm more concerned about the pass rush than the offensive line. I am concerned about the left side of the offensive line. The reason I'm concerned is, like, I love the draft pick of Nick Saldiveri. And I said that. I've said that that's probably my favorite, but I am biased towards offensive line. Can't even say who said it. King Troll, I literally just said who said it multiple times. Duke Manyweather is a great example. And you're not going to find anybody who is better respected or better well known as an offensive line scout and trainer than Duke. There isn't one. The dude literally helps pick the best offensive line in college football every year. The dude literally trains the best offensive lineman in the league every year. Holds the Mastermind Summit every year. That's his thing. And you're right, Don. But at the same time, trolls are going to troll, but trolls are content. If this is an opportunity for Saints fans to get educated about something, then we use the troll to educate. It's completely okay. Completely okay. But I mean, the left side of the offensive line is a concern. We don't know what Trevor Penning's going to be, right? Anders Pete, we doubt that he's going to be fully healthy. So even if you got Nick Saldiveri sliding in there to be maybe your left guard, maybe he does end up having that time immediately. And I've actually got him as a guy that I expect to become a starter in New Orleans within 2 or 3 years if he continues to develop from what we saw his college tape and a lot of the projections that people put on him. But you've still got that left tackle spot. And what happens? You have to slide James Hurst in there as a starter if Trevor Penning's not working out. That certainly is not giving you a lot of confidence. I mean, I think that Hurst is the Andy Dalton of left tackles. Sure, good backup, can definitely start, serviceable, but he's not what you want, right? Like, you want the high upside, successful guy. And I don't see you getting that either. So you've got question marks there. And I think that there's reason to be optimistic about a lot of these things. Like, there's a reason to be optimistic about the pass rush. One, Dennis Allen has always manufactured pass rush. If you look at it, the Saints' pressure and sack numbers have stayed up every year, no matter who's there. But it has changed and dictated how he calls and runs defense, right? So that is a big deal. If you have to change your defense around to mask an issue, in this case, the issue is your offense or your defensive line is not providing the consistency you need. Well, that's a problem. So we talk about the turnovers need to get better. Well, the turnovers are struggling because the defensive line is struggling and the team is having to account for a deficiency. So even if Foskey is nothing more than a rotational but successful pass rusher as a rookie, hell, even if he can just come in on third downs and give you something that results in him having a 4 to 6 sack season, that is a monumental W for New Orleans. If your rotation of guys between Granderson, Passignon, Turner, everything can provide you some level of consistency, and Cameron Jordan is not getting double team, triple team out the wazoo at 33, 34 years old, that's a W. But again, there's a lot of questions there, right? Like, I love picking up Kalen Saunders because traditional nose tackle, I think he's going to come in and fit really well in the alignments that New Orleans loves to run. I think he's a literal slide in and have success guy. But he's not really going to help you with the pass rush plan that much. He has a little bit of push. I mean, he's got some good power, but he's going to mostly do gap contain. He's not going to do anything too crazy. Then you've got Brian Breezy. And yeah, I'm going to call him Breezy all year long because I'm hoping to speak some Hall of Fame into his life. Big question mark, right? Like, I think that he's a great potential 3-tag, but will he be great this year? And as good as I think the DB room is, you've definitely got to have consistency at all 3 levels for your best to really be the best. And what I mean by that is, I love Marshawn Lattimore, especially now that he's on now more than he used to be, right? There was definitely time, and he has said this, not Lattimore hate episode. Lattimore's talked about this. Lattimore definitely had played down at times. Definitely played down at times. So he can only be his best when everybody else is playing up to the level that they need to play at. But if you have to have him or Honey Badger or hell, Alontae Taylor, to use a name everybody else loves, and they have to play a certain way to compensate for somebody else's deficiency, well, they're naturally lowering their peak to make up for somebody else. And you don't want to dilute your best player's play. As much as I love DeMario Davis, he's at his best when he's able to command and control the field, not being your best pass rusher, right? I think it was awesome that he set his personal career high in sacks last year. But at the same time, why did he have to do that, right? And keep in mind that he did that on less blitzing than he was doing the year before because he just got better at his craft, which is fantastic. That man was getting better at his craft at 33 years old. That is freaking awesome. New Orleans shouldn't have to rely on your blitzing weak side / middle, depending on where he's playing that time, linebacker to come in and be that guy. He's definitely at his best when he's roaming in space, when he's scraping, when he's covering tight ends, when he's dropping into those, that the hole and dropping in those deep middle zones, whatever it is his assignment is. He's better operating as the leader of that defense in the middle of the field than attacking downhill to sack the quarterback. Again, that's the deficiency on the defensive line. And if you can get some level of consistency, doesn't have to be great, but the fact that last year Carl Granderson was your number 2 defensive lineman in terms of pressures and sacks, it ain't great, right? That ain't great. That's not a winning football alignment. So let's see how it looks moving forward. Right now, I think technically Davenport had 1 more pressure, but he also had 5 less sacks than Granderson. So we'll lean and give that one to Granderson. But that's why it's so important for me to see that. Now, to be clear, I don't expect crazy high numbers from the interior. When I look at your rookie 3 tech here in Breezy, 3 sacks to 4 is fantastic for him as a rookie. Bosky getting 4 to 6 as a pass rusher on the outside would be like peak. That's where I want from him. If anything he does more is just insanely awesome. What you really need is, when you look at last year's defensive line, let's just use hard numbers. You had Cameron Jordan at 8.5 sacks. Let's just call that 9. You had Carl Granderson who had 5.5. Let's just call that 6. So 15 sacks between those two. And then you had Onyemata gave you 5. So you got 20. 20 from those. And then you had guys like Kentavious Street, Tano gave you another 3, 2. But in short, you really didn't even have 30 sacks from the defensive line. Now, as a defense, they still got 48 as a team. They got right at that close to that 50 mark. But you want to see the defensive line between 35 and 40. That's, I think, a healthy number. And you can do that with rotation. You can do that with rookies. But you shouldn't be relying on Caden Ellis and Demario Davis to be half your numbers, for your top 5. Because I think combined they were like 14 sacks. I mean, you shouldn't expect that from this style of Saints defense. If you have that, that's because somebody's not doing what they need to do. So all of this to say, if you can get the D-line playing at a level they need to, then you're going to come through and find guys like Lattimore being the elite guy that you remember, and also here comes the turnover. Same thing with Honey Badger. Same thing with even the young guys in Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor. That's when you're going to find those numbers coming back, when everybody is playing at a high level for their units. He's got to get it back. Michelle says, can you verify what defense we run? I could have sworn we ran nickel because I had an argument with some guys saying we run a 4-3 and we should side quant. The New Orleans Saints spend 60 to 70% of their time in nickel. Correct. They do not put 3 linebackers on the field very often. So, doesn't happen. It does happen, but it ain't very often. 5 sacks is very high for a rookie DT. I'd be happy with 3. Same. 5 is very high. If that happens, awesome. You would like to get 5 from all your defensive tackles, as in like combined. Like if Saunders and Brian combined for 5, that's a W. That's a W. The edge rushers like Cam typically fall off slowly with age or just fall off a cliff. It depends. Cam is very unique. So it's really tough to compare Cam to somebody else. What you typically find, though, is when guys are elite, they stay pretty damn good as long as they play. The only thing that really changes is their top end is gone. And what I mean by that is, take a look at elite guys even from his class. Let's look at Von Miller as an example. Von Miller is no longer what he was due to various things. But even with Buffalo last year, he still had 8 sacks. Now, was he getting 14, 15, 13 sacks like he was doing peak Denver? No. But he was still contributing in a big way. And the year before that, when he was with Denver before going to LA, I think that season he had 10 sacks. And that's coming off him missing 2020. So you can still have success, but they lose that elite top end, but they basically stay great to above average forever. He just stays good. Use an old example. Old Saint. Bring up the Hall of Famer, Ricky Jackson. Ricky Jackson's last season in the NFL, he was 37 years old. He was with San Francisco, 9.5 sacks. And that's with his last 3 years in New Orleans. He was 33, 34, 35. Every single year, 11.5 minimum sacks. So when guys are that level of elite, special players, and I would say Cameron Jordan's a special player because I believe he's a Hall of Fame level player. Those guys usually don't just fall off a cliff and out of nowhere, they suck so bad they're getting 2 sacks. But they also are no longer the guys getting 16, 17. They're no longer the guys just straight dominating versus double teams, triple teams. You know, they aren't able to maintain that. But when you are a special athlete, you're a special athlete. You know, it reminds me also, and again, these are just not comparisons. These are just stories to speak to what special talents can do. Y'all remember Michael Jordan, and some of y'all are old enough to remember Michael Jordan, especially towards the end of his career. But even Wizards Michael Jordan, I remember when you talk about like the camps and the basketball camps he would host and everything, he's clearly past his prime, right? And you'd have these kids coming in from high school, the best in the entire nation at the high school level, thinking that they could come after old man Cameron Jordan, in this case, Michael Jordan. And Mike would still school him. Like it wasn't even close. Like what he did to OJ Mayo, right? What you have is when guys are special, as long as they are still at, athletic age, so to speak, they're going to be some level of good. They just have something special about them genetically for a lot of these that just doesn't go away with age. Just maybe they age themselves out of their elite is no longer what a 22-year-old's elite is. So you've got great technique in Cameron Jordan. He's a master technician. The fact that he is a literal amazing athlete, and I'm not trying to pump him up, but you think about it, what he's able to consistently do as a 275, 280-pound man. Honestly, he's bigger. He's about 285, 290, depending on what he's playing at right now. And that he's 33 years old. He turns 34 in like 2 weeks. And what he's doing right now is because he's a special athlete. So I think even this year, even if he has a down year, you're still seeing him minimum in that 6-7 sack range. And I don't really think he ever leaves that. I think when he finally decides to retire a Saint, which I would say probably will be 36 years old, maybe even 35, he's going to be a guy that when he leaves, you're still like, his floor is still better than what we ended up seeing from a slew of defensive ends who've been here the past 15 years. Mr. Don says, I wouldn't be surprised if Cam had one more 10-sack season left in him, but I expect 6 to 8 for the next 2 or 3 years. Other guys should be doing more by then. Agreed. The athleticism sticks around much longer, or the athletic floor is much higher than others. I think both of those are technically true, to preach, because I do think that Cam's floor is higher than just about anybody on the team, defensive line-wise. There are other guys who have the ability to get higher than him, but they're not as consistent. There are a couple of game flashes where Peyton Turner shows you the goods, but God, those are flashes. And the fact that he's a healthy scratch means you definitely aren't any type of confident in him. And we definitely saw plenty of Marcus Davenport when he was with this team flashing better than Cam Jordan, but it was all flashes. And that's where being the great elite technician and also being the elite athlete has given Cam a level of consistency that most people just don't get. He's just special. He's just a different athletic breed. So, good stuff. All right, I'm going to grab a couple more of these because I don't want to miss any of them. Les says, should we look into adding Brockers and Malcolm Brown to add more to the DT room? Personally, I wouldn't, Lester. Again, if you think that you need a guy at any point in this training camp process, veteran process, I would wait towards the end of camp, see if the rookies and young guys got it. If they don't, then go find somebody. But you did bring in Nate Shepard, who I think is going to be your rotational backup. The rookie either starts or works into starting at 3-tech. You've got Malcolm Roach, who's also kind of more of a penetrating 3-tech than he is a run stuffer. You got Prince Amelie. If they end up keeping him around, we'll see. And then you got Kalen Saunders, who I think is without a doubt slotted in to be your starting nose tackle. So you've got a few names in there. Let them work it out. nothing ends up working, as in you don't find the guy, then you open it up to veterans in a preseason, end of training camp, and that's when I would open it up and look for somebody. Similar to an aging wide receiver that's not the same athlete, but gets open with vet savvy, good route running, knowing where to sit in the zone. Hell, TJ, I'd even say then, though, like you look at some of the great wide receivers towards the end of their career. Sure, they're not maybe 4.3 speed anymore, but not only were they still winning with technique, they were just winning because they're so freaking gifted. Like, ridiculously gifted that it's pretty rare to see a guy lose that. The only time I see guys lose that is injury. And a good example of a guy who lost it because of injury, not because of age, I think is Julio Jones. Like, Julio at this point is done. Like, he is barbecue chicken. No offense, Julio. I mean, I don't care if you're offended or not. It's true. That dude's barbecue chicken at this point. He is nowhere near anywhere close to what he was. Like, not even close. And keep in mind that he's had a career of injuries. Like, that dude has had hamstring injuries for like the past 4 or 5 years. He had a pedal foot injury going back, like 2019. He had the PCL tear, grade 3, back here in September. This dude has had injury, and it's gotten worse over the past 3 years. But he's always had some level of injury even coming into the league. But it was usually minor stuff, like the pedal toe sprains he would get, and he'd get that foot fracture every now and then, but he'd always come back from it. But now he's getting these serious injuries where his hamstring is just staying jacked up. And it's the same hamstring at this point. I don't know if y'all followed it, but it's his right hamstring. And for about 3 years, it's like every couple of games, it just pops and it's re-aggravated again. He's a guy that has gotten just completely robbed of his athletic ability because of injury. But then there are other guys who have just like continually aged and just aged like freaking wine and still look great. And I would put a Larry Fitzgerald in that list. Now, Fitz is done, obviously. But even towards the end of his career, Larry Fitz, maybe you argue, had 1 year that like, all right, dude, you're done in that last year. But hell, the dude retired or he stopped playing at 37 years old. Like, he was in the league like 17 years. And it took to like being 36 for it was like, all right, it's still good. Because remember, it was 2019. He was still having like an 800-yard season. And that's not like anything outworldly amazing. But dude, being in the league 16 years and you still put up 800 yards and like 5 touchdowns, that's nuts. That's absolutely nuts, right? So shout out to him for that. But I think that's what you typically see is when guys are healthy or at least not having major injuries like Julio did. That is what you expect from elite talents. 800 yards at 800 years old. Exactly, TJ. And Julio is simply one of those guys that I'm amazed that he still manages to get really good contracts. And I'm not trying to trash talk him. Secure the bag. If somebody's willing to pay you, then dude, secure it. But I'd have to go back and look. But I would not doubt that if you look between 2020 and 2022, trying to make sure I get my years right. I'll say if you look between 2020 and 2022, I bet that right hamstring has been injured at least 6 times. And I'm not exaggerating. I promise to God, if we go look it up, it has been injured at least 6 times in that time, in that window. Like, he's done. Like, his body is done. If he can manage to still keep getting contracts, more power to him, but it's done. Cam hasn't had that problem, knock on wood. Cameron Jordan is a literal definition of an Iron Man. Cam could still be doing 100 snap or 100% snaps if he wanted to, but the game wants him to last, so they're not doing it. But Cameron Jordan plays 16 games a year, and when he does miss, it's basically optional. Like, you can play through it, but do you have to ask him to? Cameron Jordan is everything you want in a star defensive end. He is the perfect defensive end to me. Was he the highest of highs? No, J.J. Watt's still the highest of highs from that class. To me, J.J. was the best in that class, but he also is already out the league, right? Like, he wasn't the healthiest. He had some big issues. Man, do you think Julio playing on turf so long was a significant reason for his injury history? I think it could have contributed, but hell, I am not a doctor, so I can't really speak to confidence with that. I'm trained to look at tape, not trained to judge medicals. Rashid Shaheed's production this year, more receptions than last year with Derek Carr in the building. Really depends on how they choose to use him, Noops. And also depends on how healthy is Michael Thomas. Do I expect him to get more? Well, yeah, I do. But keep in mind that he didn't really get a lot last year anyway. Now, that doesn't mean that he got nothing. I'm just saying that Rashid Shaheed, in terms of as a receiver, did not really get, 28 catches is not a lot, y'all. I mean, we're in a league where you'll have receivers, where you'll have 2 receivers on the team getting 80 receptions. 28 ain't much. So it won't be hard for him to have more receptions this year. I would like to see him around the 40 to 50 reception mark. That's what I would like to see Rashid Shaheed at this year. That doesn't include hopefully using him in at least 10 to 15 rushing attempts, end arounds, jet sweeps, pop passes, stuff like that. But I don't expect him to have like monster numbers where he's getting 80 receptions either. Now, if he pops off and gets that, fantastic. But if I'm going into the year right now, he's my starting slot, who can also slide outside to be a flanker. That means we can slide MT in, we can slide Olave in. How has he grown as a receiver? We'll wait and see. But 28 is not a lot of receptions. Now, when he did play, looked great, right? He had 6 starts last year, I think. He was active for 12 or 13 games. And some of those he didn't even see a snap, right? So if you go back to his splits, we'd have to pull it up again. But I think it was week 6. Was it week 6 where he finally started seeing some offensive snaps consistently? It took a while. I think it was week 6 that he finally started seeing some offensive snaps. And then you get to week 10 or 11. It was the LA game, I remember. LA is the first game where he got about 50% of the snaps. And that's where, at that point, you really didn't see him drop off from that again. I think it was the LA game, about 50%. But before that, there was like 5 or 6 games where he was still only getting like 10%, 12%. And then before that, he wasn't getting any. So he worked into it. And then he had like this 6-7 game stretch where he basically was in half the game or more. So opportunities, he got more towards the end of the year. I expect to get more of those starting with the first game this year. But I'm also not expecting him to get 100 receptions either. It really depends on what's going on around him. And I believe a lot in the tight end room. I think that they can really pop off this year. I think they look better in terms of on paper than what you had last year. I really like the running back room and getting back to some of those staples that made this team great when we were the offensive powerhouse, a decade ago. And then, of course, there's the Michael Thomas thing if he's any level of healthy. So getting Rashid Shaheed into that 40 to 50 reception mark that I just mentioned is completely fine, especially if you're also using him in another 10 to 15 touches in other ways. If he gets more, dude, even better. And also, just to give a reference, so last year he was like setting the NFL, or leading the NFL anyway, in terms of like yards per reception and air yards. I would be happy if his yards per reception was around 15, maybe even 14 this year, whereas last year was like something stupid, like 17 and a half. Get that down more reasonable number. I'm cool with that. Using him more intermediate routes, not just trying to burn with him. And that'll also show how much he's developed as a player. Can he be a consistent guy who is doing more than just 7 through 9s? And I'm not saying that he only did 7 through 9s last year, but they definitely took advantage of that and were slowly working in other things as the season progressed. So he's definitely one of the most exciting names to watch this year if you're New Orleans. Curious to see how he pops off, but I would love him to get 40, maybe 50 receptions. If he did that, 40 receptions, and he averages just even close to what he was doing last year in terms of yards per reception. Let's see. Let's just say that he does, 14.5? Let me do some quick math real quick. Let's just say 14 and a half. That's still pushing him at 600 yards. And that's really knocking him down his yards per reception versus last year, but giving him a more well-rounded opportunity. If he's really close to being that explosive downfield guy like he was last year, he's getting, 16 yards, then you're seeing him being almost a 700-yard receiver. So wait and see. John says, I want Shaheed catching 50 balls, not 80. I want his yards per reception to be high. I want Shaheed to be our new Devery Henderson. So let me pull Henderson up real quick just so we can remember what his peak was. His peak. Devery Henderson at his peak caught 51 receptions in 2009. That's the most he ever caught in a season. 51 receptions for 804 yards, which is right at 16 yards a reception. That's really good. Only 2 touchdowns, though, but still, that's really good. If you're New Orleans, you'd be very happy with that. If that's the stat line Rashica he can get to, you are ecstatic. I don't even need him to be that high, though. I really don't even need him to be that high. But that would be fantastic. Real question is how many receptions Olave have? Great question. I think Olave is going to be a 100-plus receiver for a long time, which means that you're giving a lot of targets to him. Last year, he only 72. This year, I expect him to get closer to 100. I really do. I think it's going to be between 85 and 90 receptions this year, maybe even getting close to 100, depending on how everything else goes. I really do believe that. Last year, his targets, he had like 120 targets last year, but his quarterback situation wasn't the best. There were a lot of forced balls his way that should have never been thrown, and there also were a lot of opportunities missed. I'm hoping that better coaching and better quarterback play gets that catch percentage up to 65 to 70% for Olave. And I think that is what pushes him to 85, 90 catches and gets him close to 100. I think that he can be one of those few flankers who can get 100 receptions. I really think that Olave can be that guy. And hell, just speaking on Michael Thomas, let's use Colston as an example. If I had to say what I would love Michael Thomas to get to this year, and I've said I don't need him to be 100% Michael Thomas All-Pro. Go look at Marcus Colston from 2009. If I could get even just a smidge of that, I'd be ecstatic. That was 70 receptions for 1,000 yards. But even if I don't, I would be super happy with the 2018 Marcus Colston stat line, which was 47 receptions for 760 yards and 5 TDs. If Michael Thomas does that stat line, this team has won the division. I'll just go ahead and say that. If Michael Thomas is healthy and plays that stat line, this team won the division. 50 receptions for 750 yards and 5 TDs, this team won the division. Not that it's all on MT, just that if MT's healthy and Olave's healthy, if this offense is producing to where Michael Thomas has got that stat line, they won the division. If everything has gone right, that's what it looks like. How do you think Jamal Williams will perform this year? Really depends on how they use him, right? At the moment, I really see him being used as the short yardage and red zone back, and then using the open spaces for Kendra Miller and Alvin Kamara. That's what I would expect. But we'll have to wait and see. I do think that Jamal Williams is a fantastic player, but also at the same time, people got really enamored with that TD mark from last year, and I don't want people to oversell him for more than he is. He is a fantastic powerhouse back, fantastic short yardage back, definitely a guy who can get you into the end zone, but he's also not a guy that I'm going to be relying on heavily between the 20s. So depends on what your realistic expectations are. I'll be honest. I expect him to get the ball carry for about 120 times, maybe get 500 to even 600 yards rushing, but get close to double-digit touchdowns, which might sound disappointing because last year he was a 1,000-yard rusher with 17 TDs. I think realistically for him, giving him the ball 120 times, him having between 500 and 600 rushing yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns is a huge W. But I don't think, it kind of like Mr. Don, I don't think he ever gets close to 17 touchdowns in a season again, unless he just gets force-fed and inside the 10, and they say, hey, we don't care if we throw it in or we run it in, we're just going to force feed him down. That's what I would expect from him. And some people might look at that as a drawback. I would say this, random and often not often, fantasy advice from Rev, don't pick up Jamal Williams in your fantasy draft. I would say don't do it. Because New Orleans is really trying to get back to their committee run. Alvin Kamara is always someone to consider late in your drafts. I would not personally pick Jamal Williams up if I was doing fantasy drafting. I wouldn't. There are some games where he might be, a guy who gets you 20-plus points in fantasy, but over through the season, I would not be surprised if he averages fantasy football-wise between 7 and 11 points a game, which is not going to win you a lot of football games in your fantasy. So, just a quick opinion. So we'll wait and see. I think that he's a good back. I think that he fits in real well when they're going to run their inside zone, even some of their power and duo, but definitely not coming close to the numbers you saw him do with Detroit last year. He says, I'm looking for Miller to be more 20 to 20. Same. I think Miller's going to be a rookie that they use a lot in space, but I also don't expect Miller to get a lot of touchdowns either. I think that Alvin Kamara and Williams will get a majority of those looks, but between the 20s, lots of Kendra Miller. I definitely have a lot of expectations of Kendra Miller. So it's very similar if you go back to the Saints prime eras. Honestly, if you remember how Reggie got used a lot, truthfully, Reggie got used that way in New Orleans. Between the 20s, wasn't used a ton inside the red zone, especially inside the 10. And there are definitely some moments that we can recall where he did do some really amazing plays, like the Miami game with the big reverse and jumping over like 7 yards into the end zone. But realistically, Reggie got used a lot between the 20s and then as a receiver and as a running back, and every now and then in the red zone. So that would be a much closer expectation of where you see Kendra Miller active. So good call out. Y'all, we are right at 1 hour. We got to wrap up the show. It's been fantastic. I love our show, man. We get really into the nitty gritty, and I appreciate the chat with y'all. We'll be back Thursday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time ish, depending on if I got any more doctor's appointments and stuff like that. Y'all are amazing. I appreciate every single one of you. Who dat? God bless. Hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Deuces. That's me. We'll catch you on the next one. Join the Discord if you haven't already. And we are out. Peace.